good. There we go. Good morning. Hello, Bumpwise families. I'm Deanna Kearns, and I'm filling in for Johanna today. And I'd like to welcome Vanessa McNamara, who is the Traveling Dietitian. And today we're going to talk all things food and mood, which is huge and a huge topic, certainly for most of us families, trying to figure out what it is that we need to be eating to make us feel good. And with that, Vanessa, can you introduce yourself to us and tell us a little bit more about what you do and who you are?
Sure. Thanks for the introduction, Deanna, and thank you for having me today. I feel privileged to be able to talk to you all about how we can nourish our brain. So I'll get into that in a minute, but just a little bit about me. So I am a dietitian. I've been a dietitian now for 24 years, showing my age. And I have been working in Singapore with my own private practice called the Travelling Dietitian for 14 years now.
Wow.
I've also worked in India. I moved from India to Singapore. Was working in the UK before that, and I did all my training to become a dietitian in Sydney, in Australia. So I've been specializing probably more in the last 10 to 12 years in pediatric dietetics, but I also see adults as well. I work for a corporate 2 days a week, so I'm seeing a lot of adults. I'm also seeing in my private practice a lot of babies, a lot of pregnant women. There's a lot of postnatal care, but also working with toddlers and children, looking at things like fussy eaters. I've been delving in quite a lot more recently into eating disorders as well, so working more with teens. So really anywhere from babies up to adults is what I'm seeing.
Amazing.
So yeah.
No, and as the breadth of life occurs and you go through different stages, you have a keen interest in, going from babies all the way to menopause and so on. I know we've talked about that as well. So, experience lends itself, right? So, yeah.
That's right. It's interesting how our interests evolve as we become more experienced in specific areas. And an example of that is that I have my own fussy eater. So I have become quite experienced, and I feel like I can really empathize with parents who have their own fussy eaters now.
Absolutely. Yeah, I had one as well. And really, people don't tend to believe you when you tell them that they just don't eat certain things. And it's tricky. It's a big emotional roller coaster, and it's tricky in the whole family and difficult to understand. And I think once we get what it's all about, then it becomes easier. But it's definitely emotional. There's no question. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. So what did you have for breakfast this morning, Vanessa?
Oh, that is a great question. I'll have to
You don't have to
say
answer that question, but
I'm very happy to share it. I'm actually a creature of habit when it comes to breakfast.
okay.
And I have my own homemade muesli. And I have that with Greek yogurt, and I have it with pomegranate and chopped up strawberries and blueberries as well.
Lovely.
So my favorite breakfast ever.
Sounds good. Sounds good. I hope you're in a good mood.
Totally. Yeah, I'm so alert now because of that.
So I know you prepared a presentation. I'm really excited to hear about everything you're going to tell us. So whenever you're ready, we're thrilled to have it.
Great. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen because I do have a lot I want to share with you, but I also want to make sure that everyone who's listening has an opportunity to be able to ask as many questions as you want along the way. I would love for you to be able to put your questions in the chat box as we're going through, and I'll keep an eye on it. I've got it open, just trying to work out the technology now. But yeah, I've got the chat box open, so I'm really happy to be asking questions as we go. I do have a presentation that I'll go through, but I'm also happy to stop and focus on a specific area if any of you, feel along the way that you want to delve into a particular direction. So I'm going to use this presentation as a guide, but please feel free to ask anything that you want as we're going through.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Thank you for that reminder. So everyone that's watching, this is always about you. This isn't about us pontificating about a topic. We want to know what's important to you. So please raise a hand, write your questions in the box, and we'll both follow along and do our best to get everything that you would like to know so that we can make this the best talk that we can. So thank you, Vanessa, for saying that. I apologize, I didn't.
No problems. No, that's great. Thanks, Deanna. But I will also make sure I leave some time just in case everyone's a bit shy, doesn't want to ask any questions as we're going through. I'll leave some time at the end for questions as well. So, yeah. So hopefully you have all had a very nourishing breakfast and you're feeling alert, because I do have a bit of information I want to cover. I have to say, I could talk about this topic for hours. There is so much interesting information out there, but I can't, and I can't cover it all. So I'm going to cover the basics. And hopefully that then ignites your interest. And I'm really happy for you to reach out to me privately. I'm going to have my email address at the end of the session of the presentation. So you're always welcome to reach out for more. If you want more information, I'm happy to share, or if you have any questions or that sort of thing. So I guess the thing is, I think we all have a brain, obviously. We all want a healthy brain, but it's also really challenging to navigate the information that's available to us. There is so much out there when it comes to nutrition. To be honest, a lot of it is incorrect. And everyone is a bit of an expert on nutrition. So it's really hard to know where to start. But I think what we eat can definitely support our mood and can help to nourish our brain, obviously. So we want to look at, like, how can we best support our brain function? How can we optimize our thinking power? I think whatever stage of life we're in, we always want to be able to optimize that as much as we can. How can we support our mood so that we're doing as much as we can nutrition wise to support that? And how can we do things like prevent memory loss and cognitive decline that comes with aging? So I think this topic does affect everyone. So whether you're a child with a growing brain, and I think there are many parents probably listening, so you want to do as much as you can to nourish, I guess, a well-developed brain as early on as possible. We know that the first 1,000 days of a baby's life, which starts at conception and goes all the way through until they are 3 years old, we know that they're really powerful and have a really strong influence in the development of a child's brain, as well as a whole heap of other health conditions, I suppose. So we know that that's a really important time. So it's optimizing that time, whether you're maybe a mum going through hormonal changes, which I'm sure many out there are, at any age, a mum of any age, to be honest. Whether you're a busy parent kind of experiencing a lack of sleep, which I'm sure there are many that are going through that at the moment. Whether you're an aging grandparent who's really determined to be able to watch your grandchildren grow. I think we all want a healthy brain. So we know, and I think it's probably only in the last decade or so, really, that so much research has gone into how we can nourish our brain optimally. But we know that things like movement, things like social engagement and interaction, we know that sleep, and we know that genetics all play a very pivotal role, I suppose, in our brain health. Now, I'm not going to be focusing on those so much because, as I said, I could talk for hours on that topic, but I'm going to zoom in on nutrition and the important role that it can play in nourishing our brains and our minds as well. Now, I know that, some of you have possibly seen this book, The Happiest, or read this book, The Happiest Man on Earth. Now, to be honest, you're probably thinking, what on earth has that got to do with this? Because it's not about brain health, it's not about nutrition. But Eddie Jaku is a wonderfully positive and wise man. He's been through a huge amount in his life. And I just love this quote, and I think it's relevant. His wisdom can be translated into everything and into every aspect of life. That a field is empty, but if you put it in the effort to grow something, then you'll have a garden. And that's life. Give something, something will come back. Give nothing, nothing will come back. To grow a flower is a miracle. It means you can grow more. Remember that a flower is not just a flower, it's the start of a whole garden. And I just think that's really lovely. And it's just a really lovely insight into, we do need to put a little bit of effort in, to some things. And I think to put the effort in where we want to reap rewards shows us that there are so many things that we can do to help ourselves. Now, coming back to nutrition, I suppose, there's a lot of negative talk around about food, and it really does worry me, actually, that there's so much negative talk about things that food can do, that one food might give us cancer, another food is going to ruin our gut, another food will cause weight gain. And I think we tend to focus on that too much. So I really want to stop focusing on the negatives. And my motto is food is food. You know, there's a place for broccoli, there's a place for ice cream. We just fit it in the right places. And I think what I want to delve into today is what can we be doing to optimize our brains and our minds and our gut health as well. And focusing on if we do enough of the positives, then, you know, there's still room for all the extras as well.
Lovely. I love that. Food is food. Yeah, I know. I agree. I think we make it too complicated sometimes. And like, I love how you said there's a lot of what we hear is misinformation, and it's fads that we get, you know, about different types of diets and and all of that. So I'm really happy that you're addressing it. And I love the quote too. I think putting that effort in, you reap what you sow, right?
Yeah, that's right. And it doesn't have to be difficult. And I think particularly like as new parents, we do put a lot of pressure on ourselves. We need to be giving our baby the perfect, you know, the perfect diet. We need to be eating the perfect diet. And it doesn't need to be like that.
Yeah.
It's just focusing on trying to put a bit of, I guess, prioritizing the good things that you can include and not worrying so much about the rest of it. The rest of it kind of falls into place, hopefully.
But
So
to
I think
reiterate, your first 1,000 days, that would include what the infant gets throughout the pregnancy, correct?
that's right. That's
Yeah.
right. But having said that, you know, I was a pregnant mum who spent the majority of my pregnancy vomiting. So
Right.
you know, it was difficult, and I did feel the pressure. Oh my gosh, I really should be eating well because I know this is really important. And you know, it does help if we can get as many different flavors into our baby's diet through the amniotic fluid. You know, if we can expose them to all of that, great. So it's doing what you can.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that you said that exposure to different things. And because a lot of the women that we work with, Johanna and I, pregnancy specific, is what should I avoid? You know, always avoiding things and trying to make sure that the diet, you know, that they're not affecting their baby. Anyways, I'll let you continue. My apologies.
No, great. Please jump in whenever. And if we don't get through everything, that's totally fine. So yes, I'm glad that resonates with some of you. So I suppose, I guess on that positive note, I did want to now move on to start with you guys. So for those of you who are listening, can you just let me know through the chat box, if you've got a spare hand, what is your favorite food that boosts your mood? I think we've all got something. Perhaps, Deanna, can we start with you?
Oh God, you put me on the spot. I guess this is,
Sorry, I totally did.
I don't know. You know what? I can't think of anything. You know what just popped in my mind? This is not my favorite food, but I really love chickpeas. Every time I eat a garbanzo bean, I like the texture. I don't know, there's something about that.
Wow.
I feel really
Wow.
good in a salad. You know, we went on holiday and I gravitated, you know, there's, you know, the buffet breakfast you get, and you just think, oh my gosh, what am I going to eat? And somehow I go to the things that are really simple, not so complicated. And that's
Yeah.
one of them. I don't know why I said that.
I think that we tend to go for, I guess, something that boosts our mood is something that we enjoy and that makes us feel good. And that, you know, I mean, and sometimes, and I guess that's going to change as well. Sometimes it's going to be ice cream, but sometimes it's going to be a big, beautiful, fresh salad, you know. So I think the thing is being able to tune into that and give us what we kind of want at the time. But so we've got
Cheese would be
grilled
a second.
cheese. Yes, nice grilled cheese, beautiful. Fancy dark chocolate, lovely. I love these dark chocolate chia pudding with dark chocolate. Wow, there's a bit of a theme going on here, I think. Chocolate is a mood booster, isn't it? Ice cream pomegranate. Yes, that is one of mine too. It just makes me feel great, pomegranate. Pineapple, froyo, crunchy nut cereal. Excellent. Eggs, dark chocolate. Lovely. Excellent. I love that. There's a real variety out there, actually. And probably depends on the mood that you're in at the time. You know, one of mine as well is coffee. I have to say, it's not a food, but when I have a delicious coffee, I've just finished mine.
I'm drinking mine.
I feel amazing. I just love it. Love the taste. I just, it's just the highlight of my day. So, so thanks for sharing that, everyone. That's great. I think it's really good to always remind yourself of what is the food that makes me feel the best. And running with that and reminding yourself of it. So this is what I had planned to cover. Whether we get through it all, no problems. But I do want to talk about kind of how does food improve our brain? What's the process that we go through? There are a couple of research studies that are particularly interesting. I'm not going to get into the science too much, but a SMILES trial, a bit about the Mediterranean diet and how that is relevant. Another one so that's more focusing on the mood, but I'm going to focus also on things like cognitive decline and how we can prevent that. Looking at something like the MIND diet. I'm going to go through a few kind of basic key nutrients and the impact that they have on our brain if we get that far. And, just a little touch on the gut-brain axis, because we know that our gut is heavily connected to our brain. So our brain is our primary kind of survival organ, and it's heavily linked to our gut. So there is that connection that we'll touch on. And just my version of a happy diet, what's the happiest diet that you can follow for you, which is going to be different for everybody.
Right.
Great. So we'll stop along the way and see how everyone's going with that. But I guess I just wanted to start with how food is involved with the brain. We think of the brain as a very separate organ to the gut, but we know that there is that very strong connection through what we call the gut-brain axis. And all of the food that we eat goes through our gut and goes through our digestive tract. But because our brain is our primary survival organ, we wouldn't survive without a brain. So it's also the hungriest, and it's also the most nutrient demanding organ in our body, actually. But we often forget about it. We're too busy thinking about eating for a healthy heart or, eating to lose weight. But we forget that the brain is the one that actually needs it the most.
Interesting.
Yeah, it really is. And if we're shortchanging it, if we're not, giving it enough of the good foods, focusing too much perhaps on the ones that aren't going to be great for it, then the rest of the body is actually going to battle to maintain its health as well. So it's almost like it should be the first stop, which is what we're realizing with more and more research going into it. So I guess interestingly, the first thing that it does is that food is providing the raw material to create neurotransmitters. So neurotransmitters, you've probably heard of them. They're actually neurotransmitters are actually they communicate between the nerves. They're responsible for shuttling messages between the nerves in our brain, and so they're connecting our brain cells to our nerves, and so they contribute to our thinking and to our mood quite a lot. And so you've probably heard of neurotransmitters like things like serotonin and dopamine, which are our feel-good chemicals. And there are others like there's glutamate or there's acetylcholine that we don't hear as much about, but they're all essential to our nerve functioning and our brain function. So the reason that they're related to this is they're helped by components of foods like the vitamins and minerals and antioxidants and protein and fats that we consume are heavily involved in creating these new neurotransmitters. So if we're not getting enough of those, of those raw materials, then our feel-good chemicals are just not going to be there. So I guess the big question is can you increase or, balance out your neurotransmitters through food? And the answer is definitely a resounding yes. Do you need supplements to do this? Well, actually, no. You can get everything that you need from food itself. It's very easy to go and take a whole heap of supplements thinking that this is all you need, but actually we absorb them so much better in the form of a whole food.
Yeah, I always remind my clients that we don't always absorb, what you can end up with is just very expensive urine at the end of the day. You spend all the money on supplements. If you were to eat these foods, you would, definitely retain the nutrients much better.
That's right. And you're just not getting the array of nutrients in the supplement that you are in a whole food, in its most natural form. So I think if we can get it through foods, that's always what we want to prioritize.
Right.
So another really interesting thing I think that food contributes to is neuroplasticity. Plasticity. Now, I don't know if any of you have heard of neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
Any thumbs up? Thumbs up if you have, or thumbs down if you haven't. Um, Neuroplasticity is basically the capacity for our brain cells to change in response to our behavior. So the really great thing is that the brain is highly active and highly malleable. And it's a constant kind of learning machine throughout our lifespan. We never stop learning. It never stops being malleable. And so that's a really great thing that, it's never too late to start. And I think the benefit of, of food and our diet being able to contribute to this means that, it's always worthwhile kind of eating a balanced diet to help with this. Another thing is that exercise offers really a lot of benefits in neuroplasticity as well. But I'm not going to discuss that so much today. Now, because of the strong connection between our brain and our gut, the important thing about diet is that it helps to nourish our gut microbiome. So you've probably heard a bit about our microbiome. I think it's become a bit of a buzzword in the last probably 10 years or so. A lot of research going into how can we create the best microbiome for us, which is basically the genetics of our gut. So we really want as many different bacteria in our gut as possible. So the more diverse the bacteria we have in our gut, the better our gut health is going to be. And the better our brain health is going to be in response to that. So I'm going to talk a bit more about that, but that's kind of a big way that diet can help, is just by nourishing that. But I will come back to that, as we're going through. I guess one other kind of really important point is that foods can help to reduce inflammation. Now, you hope you notice that I've focused on food being able to help reduce our inflammation rather than food causing inflammation, because that's honestly, I feel like when I look at Instagram these days, it's full of people going, oh, don't eat that. That's an inflammatory food. We hear about all these foods, well, that's bad for you, it causes inflammation. I really just want to focus on the foods that reduce the inflammation. I think, that's how we want to target that, and it can be really powerful.
Interesting.
Oxidative stress is another one which is
Yes.
linked to inflammation. And so, by inflammation, obviously I don't mean like a swollen, ankle or like a cut that's inflamed. There's acute inflammation, there's chronic inflammation. And the chronic inflammation we're looking at is when there's just a lot of chronic inflammation throughout our body. That's what increases our risk of chronic disease. So that's what increases our risk of heart disease, of cancer, of diabetes, and also mental health disorders, I suppose, as well.
Right.
So this chronic low-grade inflammation in our body actually increases the risk of us developing depression.
Right.
Which I think is the really interesting point today. And so people who have depression already, inflammation might hinder recovery. So it works both ways. It can both be a cause and it can also be a consequence of depressive disorders. So that's a lot of what I want to focus on, is how can we reduce that inflammation to help to reduce the risk of either developing depression or helping to manage it.
Right. And with chronic inflammation or inflammation, how do we know? How do we know that we have inflammation? Is it something that we can assess or have that work done, or do we have symptoms? How does that work a little bit?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, you can have blood tests. You can kind of look at things like C-reactive protein and things like that. But that's just a little snapshot of how things are going. I think we talk about inflammation very generally.
I see.
And I think the big thing is that it's more that we can't feel it. That's for sure. But I think if there is this ongoing inflammation, and it's not like we can even have, it's not necessarily inflammation in the gut. You could have an endoscopy and they could find that there's inflammation in the gut, but that's not kind of what we're talking about. This is more this systemic inflammation in the gut. And it's a very good question because it's not necessarily easy to answer.
Right.
I think the way I would like to look at it is having a healthy lifestyle, which includes regular exercise, healthy diet, plenty of sleep,
Yeah. Yes.
is going to just keep our bodies optimizing, working at their best. Without this, because it's a gradual thing. Inflammation just gradually builds up. And then we realize, okay, we're at higher risk of heart disease and that sort of thing down the track. Yeah.
And that is the number one problem for women, right? Not cancers and so on. It's heart
Heart
disease.
disease, yeah, particularly post menopause.
Yes.
Yes. And so that's and they're all related, right? Things like heart disease, things like depression. This can all be a big link that comes back to symptoms like of perimenopause and menopause as well. And, we can start these symptoms from the age of 40. Another one that I think is really interesting is that our risk of cognitive decline in women increases significantly post-menopause.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think, trying to nurture a healthy brain as early as you can, but also, if you are at that period, going through that period, it's thinking, okay, what can I do right now? And if you have a strong family history of dementia or, then I think, or any kind of cognitive decline, then I think looking at your diet can be a really great way of helping to manage that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So a really interesting trial, I think, and I love the name of it, called the SMILES trial. Close to my heart, it was also, this was done, conducted at Monash University in Australia at the Food and Mood Centre. So there's a whole, this shows how important it is. There's a whole centre set up at Monash University called the Food and Mood Centre because of this. Headed up by Professor Jacker, Felice Jacker, who is, a huge expert in her field. And, there had already been a lot of research conducted, into the quality of diet and the influence that that has on our mental health, particularly depression. But there hadn't been, really high quality research done. And so the SMILES trial was conducted to answer the question, if I improve my diet, will my mood improve? Is there a direct relationship between the two? And so SMILES stands for supporting the modification of lifestyle in lowered emotional states. Don't worry too much about that, but that acronym is relevant. So, and so, studies had shown that higher intakes of fruit and vegetables and whole grains and things like that had been very beneficial, but there'd been no like gold standard research where randomized control trials were used. So what they did was they had 180 men and women with clinical depression, and they randomly assigned these to two groups, either a group who were in a dietary support group, so they were heavily counseled on improving their diet, or a social support group. So there was support along the way, but they were just, separated between the two. And it was the first really effective study to show that making dietary changes can be really effective in improving the mental health of individuals living with depression. So what they were, the participants in the dietary support group were counseled on, none of this is really probably new to anyone, but it was simple things. It was counselling them to replace white bread with whole grains and things like sourdough bread. It was counselling them to replace kind of sweet processed cereals with the unsweetened muesli and oats, focusing on the oats predominantly. Replacing pizza with things like vegetable-based stir fries. None of this is rocket science, as I said. Replacing processed meats with fish and small amounts of lean red meat. Replacing sweets with fresh fruit. And now, I really want to stress that this didn't mean that people couldn't have sweets in their diet. It was just trying to up the intake of fruit and reduce the intake of the sweets. It definitely wasn't eliminating it. It was trying to get people to include things like beans and legumes and nuts and seeds with meals and snacks on a regular basis, and also include olive oil as the main source of fat for things like cooking and in salads and things like that. So all of this is basically based on the Mediterranean diet that you've probably heard about. And I'm going to show you what a Mediterranean diet looks like. But this was a modified version of the Mediterranean diet. So, and before I go into exactly what that Mediterranean diet is, I think after 12 weeks of intervention, which, it's only 3 months, it's not a huge amount of time, it's not years by any means, but the dietary support group showed significantly greater improvements in mental health outcomes compared to the social support group. So 32%, so about a third of the dietary support group actually went into remission, which is really, really significant.
That's pretty significant.
It's really significant. And this is really like gold standard quality research. It's not just, looking at 10
tricky
people.
part, right, is getting that research and finding that those studies that really, are funded well and done thoroughly. So yeah, absolutely.
I mean, yeah, a lot of the research that we hear about on social media is like on 10 people or, just very poorly designed trials. You can't argue with a randomized control trial.
Yes.
So, they had the people who improved their diets the most also had the most improvement in their diet. So kind of the more they went, the better their symptoms were, and the more their symptoms kind of resolved. Now, interestingly, there was no weight change in either group, as it's not a weight loss diet. This was completely separate to weight loss, and it was focused on nutritional quality as opposed to calories. So calories were not part of it. And so, so I think you can see that the results are pretty significant. I mean, an added bonus of that as well is that, the Mediterranean diet actually costs almost 20% less than kind of the kind of more standard, I guess we call it the SAD diet, the standard American diet. But the SAD, which is quite relevant too. But the authors did stress, and this is really important, I think, is that the authors stress that people suffering from depression shouldn't be replacing therapy, and they shouldn't be replacing drug treatment with the Mediterranean diet. It should be really that that a healthy diet can support other interventions. And I think that's a really important take home, that we're not saying to change whatever you're doing, but perhaps, the healthier your diet, perhaps the better you're able to manage your medication, and the more you're going to be able to respond to therapy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always an adjunct to looking at exercise and food and everything. It's all in layers, combination. And what I like about that acronym SMILES, lowered emotional states, that you don't have to have clinical depression to have a lowered emotional state. You can be a postpartum mama. You can be all of these lowered emotional states are definitely supported by food. And you can see how this would also affect many of us that are under a lot of stress and sleep deprivation and so on and so forth. And you can also see people who are depressed tend to eat quick fix foods, right? Like the crisps or the chips and the cereals that are processed and so on. So it really does make a big difference as to what you reach for.
Yeah, it's very true. And I think, I mean, we kind of all have to admit that, after eating well, we do feel better, and definitely when people in the depths of depression, it's really hard to find the energy, to find the motivation to be able to prepare a really well-balanced meal, but it does become that vicious cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Yeah.
So, yeah, sorry, keep going.
Please go ahead.
I just wanted to show this slide because I think this can be a way to kind of almost quantify what does a Mediterranean diet look like. And now the reason that we all love the Mediterranean diet, I mean, it has been so well researched over decades and decades. We know that, again, the majority of the reasons why the Mediterranean diet is effective is because it helps to reduce inflammation. And so research that's been done, years and years ago on heart health, and like Nurses Health study that's, looked at thousands and thousands of people followed over a really long period of time, all comes back to actually, this is probably the most effective diet that we can follow for reducing inflammation in our bodies, whatever we're measuring. And so this one that I've got in front of you is a modified Mediterranean diet. But the thing I love most about the Mediterranean diet is that it is easy to follow. You know, there's no rules really, but what you can see is the bottom half of the pyramid, the darker the green, are the foods that we want to be having every day. So we want to be having a lot of whole grains. Now, I just really want to emphasize this point because, you know, it's very popular, very trendy to avoid carbs, particularly if we're trying to lose weight. And, you know, it's really tempting as a new mum trying to shift your baby weight to just think, right, I'll just cut out carbs and that will help. Effectively what you're doing, and you know, it can help with certain things. But what it's also doing is you're reducing the health of your gut, because actually all the whole grains that we eat are what feeds our microbiome. So whole grains are what give us the best bacteria and the most diverse set of bacteria that we can have in our gut, which nourishes our brain. So, you know, I think try not to go down that route of just cutting out carbohydrates because they are really providing us with a whole heap of vitamins and minerals and antioxidants that are going to help with our brain and our gut. So there's plenty of whole grains. There's an abundance of fruit and vegetables. I think that's probably the central tenet of all of this. I totally understand that it's easier said than done to be eating a lot of whole grains. And, you know, something I think working in Singapore, if you're eating out, if all your meals are out, it can be really difficult to be getting an abundance of fruit and vegetables in your diet. So it's definitely something that you want to be thinking about. And you know, like if you're having one piece of fruit and one vegetable every day, if you can try and have, you know, an extra piece of fruit and an extra vegetable, that's fantastic. You know, wherever you're at the moment, it's just trying to build on that, I think is the most important thing. And just thinking practical ways that you can make it easy to bring into your busy lives. So I think, you know, including lots of fruit and vegetables, lots of whole grains, including dairy on a daily basis. Now, you know, not everyone can have dairy, not everyone can tolerate it, and that's fine. But you know, this modified Mediterranean diet does really illustrate actually that having dairy in our diet and having like enough calcium can actually be beneficial. So that can be something that comes in every day. Olive oil, because of the really beneficial monounsaturated fats, that can come into our diet every day. And nuts and seeds are a really crucial component as well. And again, if we're trying to lose weight and if you're tracking calories, you know, if you're using an app or something like that, nuts tend to be one that goes because we think, oh, they're high in fat, they're high in calories, I better not eat nuts. But I would strongly encourage that everybody eats at least a handful of nuts every day.
Yeah. Yeah, we've made that a habit. My teenagers say, "Wow, there's nothing but old people snacks in our pantry." Like there's yogurt, there's nuts, there's things, you know. And they're like,
And old
yeah,
people
you know,
snacks, I've
so
never
they're
heard.
funny. They're actually really good eaters, but we always go to the nuts for a snack, and
Yeah.
so this is what I get as a response. It's interesting too, when you have young children, I started eating, you know, vegetable sticks with hummus a lot more, things like that. Like that's an easy way to get your nuts as well as your fruits and so on. It's just, I think that 3 o'clock kind of snacky period, sometimes that's the place where you can add that in, right? When you're a little bit hungry before dinner, but that's a good time to kind of throw something healthy in the mix and
Yeah.
always have to be on a plate.
I completely agree. And I think, you know, often children, if we're talking about children, that is their best time of day. Their snacks are their optimum time to get nutrients in. And if you know that you've given them a really nutritious snack, it takes the pressure off dinner, you know, and if they're more likely to have their vegetables at a snack time when they're hungry and they're active, and, you know, if they have some nuts in there and some yogurt and some veggie sticks and some hummus or whatever, fantastic. You know, it doesn't really matter what they have for dinner then.
Yeah.
So yes, I agree. And they don't need to be fancy. You know, just having some raw carrots and cucumber or whatever is fantastic. So I think, yeah, getting them in on a regular basis is a really good habit to start from the beginning. And, you know, if you have a baby and you're feeding a baby, it's just getting as much variety of these in as early as possible.
Right.
I think as well, focusing on plant-based sources of protein. now, in case I don't get to it later, protein is super important. Like I mentioned before, for creating neurotransmitters, for building neurotransmitters in our brain, protein is really one of the most important things that we can do, is to be getting enough protein to create serotonin and dopamine. So I think if we can prioritize plant-based sources of protein, that's fantastic, because anything plant-based is going to nourish our gut the most. So if we can get in the habit of having some lentils and chickpeas and beans, whether it be as a snack, by having like roasted chickpeas or some hummus or that sort of thing, or whether it be as part of a meat-based meal. Plant-based doesn't mean vegetarian. I honestly really, it totally can be vegetarian, but a plant-based diet can still include meat, I believe. It just means there's more plants than there is animal products. And so, even if you were making a spaghetti bolognese or a chili or something like that, trying to make half of it lentils, or adding beans to a chili or something like that, all of that, like trying to get those extra lentils and beans in, can be super beneficial. Including some lean red meat is fine. It's a good source of iron and zinc. Obviously, this Mediterranean diet doesn't look at sustainability. So that is a whole separate topic that I'm not talking about today. So that is completely a personal thing, there, whether you do include meat and animal products or not. But including small amounts of lean red meat and fish and poultry can be part of this Mediterranean diet, including some eggs that are nutritious as well. And so, having the eggs at the top, it doesn't mean you should only have eggs, occasionally. Eggs are super nutritious. It's just that, they're not something that you have to be having every day, but they are a great source of protein that can help to produce neurotransmitters.
And choline, right? Is that right?
Choline, yes, very good. Great
Because
question.
I
Yeah.
mean, I don't like egg yolk, but apparently I'd have to have like 50 heads of broccoli to replace that one egg yolk. So I think that now I'm okay. I'm going to throw it
Yeah.
there.
Mhm.
So
The,
interesting.
the good thing though, so choline, I mean, really interesting. And I think it's probably more pregnant women
Right.
and women or parents, with babies, that have heard more about choline these days. Because when I was pregnant, I'd never, and being a dietitian even, I didn't really know much at all about choline, but it's much more of a buzzword. And the amazing thing about choline is that, so it's great for brain development for sure, but it also helps us store memories and process memories. And I think if I could do anything to improve my memory, that would be
Exactly.
amazing. So, but the good thing is choline is in eggs, but it's also in nuts and seeds. It's
Okay.
also in, Brussels sprouts, and broccoli, and meats, meat and fish as
Right.
well. Yeah.
Okay.
So sorry, I realize I really am going on, and time is ticking on as well. Um, but there is a
We have a
question.
question, I
Yeah.
think, from Sunita. So
Mm.
curious why more red meat is recommended versus the
Mm.
chicken and fish.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good one. I actually, to be honest, that's something I don't love about this modified Mediterranean diet that's presented here. So this was the modified Mediterranean diet for the SMILES trial.
I see.
Um, so yes, I agree. I don't think there needs to be a difference. And actually, I probably would suggest more of the poultry and fish than the lean red meat. But I think, we do. It's good to recognize that lean red meat, provides valuable sources of iron and zinc as well. But yeah, it's a very good question, and it's something that I think is a little bit misleading about this. If I'm going to show you the Mind diet in a minute, which is slightly different, and that may answer your question a little bit there. Yeah, but it's a great one. Um, I'm not going to go through this with you now, but I'm actually happy to share this. The Food and Mood Center have created a quiz on how Mediterranean, it's like a little checklist, how Mediterranean is your diet. And it's just a little tick box. It's looking at kind of how much olive oil are you having? Are you having 2 or more serves of vegetables a day? Are you having fruit? Are you having less red meat? So that's a little bit contradictory to that pyramid that was just shown. Are you having less kind of butter and margarine and cream, so sources of saturated fats? Are you having, looking at the amount of sweetened beverages you're having, looking at the amount of beans and lentils and things like that. So, I won't go through that in detail, but, there are quizzes. You can even just Google Mediterranean diet quiz. There are a few websites that have their own modified version of the Mediterranean diet quiz as well, just to check how well you're going as far as a Mediterranean diet goes.
I think it's also important to remember, people say that they're eating really well, but then it's also, what are you drinking? How much sugar are you getting in carbonated drinks or these bubble teas or these juices that are,
Yeah.
all sweet, but no fiber and so on. So I think sometimes we fool ourselves to think that we're eating a healthy meal, but we're actually adding, and I liked the little asterisk of 2 units of wine at the very bottom. There's a lot of sugar in that too, right? So we're looking at
True.
what do we drink and how does that affect us? And also, is that something that we're conditioned to crave sugar, or is that inherited? Is that, I'm curious about.
That is a big question.
Okay.
Yes, I think that it definitely can become a habit.
Right.
And this is, I mean, it's an interesting point, I suppose, if we bring up something like artificial sweeteners,
Yeah.
because artificial sweeteners can be up to 200 times sweeter than sugar itself.
Yes.
And I think the really interesting thing here is the more sweet you have, the more sweet you need. So actually, even though there are so many diet soft drinks out there and things like that, it doesn't mean that we've got any lower incidence of diabetes and obesity and things like that. Actually, it's more, even though we've got artificial sweeteners around. So I think it definitely can be a habit. The amount of sweet we have, we just depend on that and becomes more and more.
Interesting.
I've got no issues with sugar. I really don't. I don't believe we don't need to be cutting sugar out of our diet, but we need to be making sure there's plenty of room for all the good stuff first.
Right.
I think if we've got plenty of fruit and some vegetables and nuts and seeds and yogurt and whole grains and all of that, it's
Yeah.
okay to have a bit of sugar in there. But you're right that there are studies showing that if you have more than one sweetened beverage a day, it increases your risk of developing diabetes by more than 20%.
Yeah.
So, that's really significant, actually. So I think it's really being careful not to drink your calories with things like,
Yes.
and even with diet soft drinks, I wouldn't be doing that on a daily basis either, just because of that high level of sweetness. The other thing, just relevant to this, is that artificial sweeteners completely can eradicate all the good bacteria from your gut. So it can actually wreck your gut microbiome.
Interesting. Wow, that's fascinating. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that's why the WHO have now put out warnings on artificial sweeteners and diet soft drinks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
So I think just because I think it's really interesting and I think our brain, is important at every age, I just wanted to address this mind diet as well, because, we've talked about mood, but I think, this mind diet is actually a combination of both the Mediterranean diet and another really well researched diet called the DASH diet. The DASH diet it stands for the dietary approach to systolic hypertension. Don't worry so much about that, but it's basically it's a blood pressure lowering diet. And so they did a combination of the Mediterranean diet and this blood pressure lowering diet, and studied the impact it has on cognitive decline. And so this mind diet was created to help prevent dementia, and reduce the decline of our brain function with age. And this is, I think, where again, it is very similar. And I suppose the point of showing you this is really that it's, having all of these really good foods is going to help with mood and cognitive decline. So this I think can be helpful because it kind of quantifies it a little bit, which can be easier to put into practice. Again, though, don't stress if you're not having all of this, but just think if there are simple ways that you can gradually kind of include this. So it focuses on green leafy vegetables, having more than 6 serves a week.
Yeah.
It's basically most days having some green leafy vegetables. All other vegetables having at least 1 serve per day, but I would just say have as many as you can.
Yeah.
And I think for gut health, just having as much variety as you can as well. We tend to get a bit stuck on specific, the same fruit and vegetables.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, so if we can branch out a little bit and if we can include some different kind of fruits and vegetables in there, try something new, sometimes that can really help to promote diversity in our gut. So the Mind diet focuses on berries as opposed to fruit. But to be honest, I think if you're having lots of fruit and you're including berries as part of that, that's going to be even more beneficial. And they're suggesting twice a week, nothing too challenging there. Nuts more than 5 times a week. So that comes back to that handful a day. Olive oil, and basically they're just saying as much as possible. Whole grains, 3 serves a day. So that is, and that's probably a bit more than many guidelines, but I'd just say trying to include whole grains at most meals if you can. So things like brown rice and whole grain bread, and I would consider lentils and chickpeas and nuts and seeds whole grains as well.
Okay. Yeah. I'd like to know more about what are the whole grains? Like, how can I get 3 servings a day? I can't eat lentils or rice 3 times a day. And
I
so
agree. I
getting more,
agree.
if that one's the one that I always feel like, how am I going to do that? But
And
I
they're
love,
not a
I
lot. It's
love
not a
how
huge.
it's quantified here. Or,
It does make it helpful, but I think, yeah, you're right. I would just say it could be including some oats at
oh, okay.
breakfast or as part
Whole
of a
wheat
muffin,
bread.
like add some oats to your muffins. When I make burger patties, I add oats as my binder.
Oh, yeah.
Like little things like that, putting oats or oat flour or something like that into your muffins or cookies or whatever that you're making. Adding whole grains wherever possible. Having a slice of whole grain bread. Having some brown rice, and a serve isn't much. It might be like half a cup.
That's
It doesn't need to be a huge quantity, but it's just getting those whole grains in to nourish the gut mostly, to kind of provide something for that bacteria to feed off
got
is
it.
the main
I
thing.
see. I see. Taryn wants to know what kind of nuts, because she's heard that peanuts
Mm.
aren't very healthy.
Mm.
So are there
Yeah,
nuts that are better than others?
I think every nut has something different to offer. So, almonds are a great source of calcium, and walnuts are a fantastic source of omega-3 fats. Omega-3 fatty acids are well known for their anti-inflammatory effect. So things like walnuts, chia seeds, flax seeds are all really good anti-inflammatory foods. Macadamias are really high in monounsaturated fat. So they've all got something to offer. I wouldn't say that peanuts are unhealthy by any means. We have to understand that all nuts are high in fat, but that's actually one of the good things about nuts. They're a great source of fiber, great source of protein, and they've all got that. So whatever type of nut it is, it's all high in fiber and protein, and they've all got good fats as well. And that combination of the three of those things is what makes it like a multivitamin. But I would try not to eat just peanuts. So I would have a balance of them all. And they don't have to be whole nuts. If if your teeth aren't great or you don't really like whole nuts, add some nuts to a smoothie or use nut butter. Or blend them up, and if you're making some muffins or something, add some ground almonds, to a recipe like that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Shanita, just because I want to make sure that we're keeping up with the questions, she's saying,
Mm.
just a thought, I think it's worth looking at this with local vegetables and fruits. Berries aren't really grown in our part of the world, making them expensive.
Mm.
Absolutely true. I just bought
Very
raspberries,
true.
my favorite, and I think of that as a treat. And
Mm-hmm.
they're flown and stale and so on. And also berries are in the dirty dozen. Are there any local fruits or berries that we can substitute? I think that's a really good point. And even looking
Wow.
at that Australian trial, I'm looking at what is that population eating? What are we eating in Japan? What are we eating in Singapore? I mean, we pretty much import everything here. This is the
Mm.
problem. There's local-ish, right? It's
Yeah,
a bit trickier when it comes down to
it's
all that.
tricky.
But
And
thought, Sunita, thank you.
yeah, it's a really great point. And I think if we can eat seasonal, that is always going to be best.
Yeah.
But because we're not growing a lot of our own in Singapore, it's quite difficult to do. And we can get strawberries all year, but they're coming a long way. Um, so yes, I mean, I think buying fresh from the market, I think is great. They're often fresher if you're buying from a wet market, whereas they could have been traveling for weeks, at a supermarket.
Yeah.
You know, that's one thing you can do. I mean, you bring up a good point, Sunita, about the dirty dozen. So if you're not aware, the FDA in the US, they do have a guide as to the, I guess, which foods are worth choosing organic and which not to bother
Right.
with. So they have the clean 15, which is basically fruit and vegetables that are, you know, generally not such a concern when it comes to pesticide residues and things like that.
Yes.
But the dirty dozen are the ones that if you're going to go organic, then you may as well with these ones. So yes, so berries are tricky, you know, and I personally think that just for me, what's most important is the abundance of fruit and vegetables, whatever that is. And so, you know, a lot of people often ask about organic food. And, you know, for me, it's much more important that you're having a lot of fruit and vegetables rather than just having a few organic ones. I
Right.
think the abundance is going to be far more protective than the risk of a non-organic fruit and vegetable.
And it also depends on the certifying body of that organic
Mm.
food, right? We're much stricter in Australia and North America than here in Asia. They can say it's organic, but I don't think there's that strict rules. So
Mm,
it's tricky to know.
it is.
And someone wants to know also, does almond milk count towards eating nuts?
No,
No.
that's a very good question. There is
Yeah.
very little almond in almond milk. It's a
Okay.
really low source of protein, you know, and yeah, I wouldn't bother, to be honest.
The
Yeah.
other one is frozen foods. Do they have less nutrition? I think I know the answer to this, but please.
Definitely not, you know, so there is
I-
absolutely, you know, we actually frozen vegetables are often more nutritious
Yes.
because they've been picked and frozen straight away. So they kind of
Flash frozen. Yeah.
snap frozen and they retain the nutrients in the freezing process. Whereas sitting on a shelf for several days, their nutrient content declines. So definitely frozen food is
Oh,
fantastic.
good
Yeah.
question, Farn. That's great.
Mm, really good. Yep. And you know, there's no issue with using canned either, like canned fruit and canned vegetables, but providing lots of nutrients as well. Yeah.
Mhm, mhm. Interesting, interesting.
If I just get onto this next slide and
Yes,
then
you do. You
you
do.
know,
Yes.
I've got I won't be able to get through everything. Which I definitely won't. But yeah, this also includes fish at least once a week, beans 4 times a week. So that's, you know, quite significant. Chicken or turkey twice a week. So this comes back to that question about why is red meat? Yeah, it's a little bit I think it's just working out what meats that you like and just having a balance of them. Wine, you know, totally fine on a Mediterranean diet, having wine. This one's just suggesting that you have less than 1 glass per day. So, you know, I would say make sure you've got at least a few days that are alcohol free, limit to 1 glass if you can. And just the other thing I just wanted to address, because I think the Mind Diet does address foods that we don't want to be including too much of. But if you look at the quantities, it's not that bad, you know. So they're suggesting that we're not having too much butter or margarine, so less than a tablespoon a day, you know,
Okay.
reasonable.
Yeah.
Less cheese, less than once a week. That one, you know, is perhaps a little bit more difficult. Red meat, less than 3 serves a week. So, you know, I always just come back to the World Cancer Research Fund that recommends less than 500 grams of red meat a week to help to reduce our cancer risk. I think that's quite a nice guide to work on. Fried food less than once a week. So, you know, limit your French fries to less than once a week if you can. Pastries and sweets. I mean, this one, less than 4 times a week. You know, I probably wouldn't say you need to be having it 4 times a week, but, you know, having them sometimes
It's excessive.
as part of a balanced diet. Breastfeeding mums, you know, have a bit of cake, enjoy it, but not too much of it.
Yeah. Makes good sense.
I'm actually not going to worry about that. And you know what? I'm not going to go through the rest of these because I think I've actually addressed a lot of what I was going to talk about: carbohydrates and protein and fat. I guess the only one I'd probably finish on is this vitamins and minerals, you know, that like folate that's in green leafy vegetables often leads to low serotonin levels. So kind of interesting connections there. Low vitamin D is often linked to depression. So get out in the sun, get some
Absolutely.
sunshine.
Yeah. Most Singaporeans are deficient of that. There's no.
Most, yep,
Yeah.
exactly. It's super, super common.
Yeah,
So,
and especially postnatal depression. In the studies that we see, we talk about food and we talk about being hydrated, but actually the sun is the key component in helping us. So my new mamas, I know it's hard to get out. I don't care if you just sit on a bench for 10 minutes in the morning and in the evening, but
mhm,
yeah, big
mhm.
deal. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry.
sunlight is particularly, yeah, important. And I mean, it's about 10 minutes of sunlight a day that we require to maintain vitamin D levels. I would say though, once your vitamin D has dropped low,
Yeah.
you need a supplement to bring that up. It's very difficult to bring your vitamin D levels up without sun.
Yes.
But sun can be a great way of maintaining vitamin D.
In Canada and the UK, we're actually given vitamin D as women breastfeeding and pregnant women to get that.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. Yeah, good call. And just very, I'm not actually even going to talk about that because I think, but I just also wanted to kind of just highlight that actually my happy diet includes a variety of foods, but I think most importantly, it includes foods that you love, foods that make you happy. It includes eating with people that you love and eating without distractions so that you can really focus on the flavor of food and making food a really a positive part of your life. It's got lots of different colors on it and an abundance of enjoyment.
I love that. I really love that you ended with that, especially eating without distraction, because my goodness, how many of us eat on our phone or watching something on television, and our children do the same. We don't have that ability to understand when we're satiated or what we're tasting or enjoying it. And I find I now I make myself turn that phone off and just focus on chewing and eating and tasting. I don't do it all the time. I'm on my phone sometimes, but boy, does that ever make a difference, I think, in how we regulate our, the way that we eat and how it changes how we see, eating in
I
general.
agree.
Yeah,
Yeah, I find it's really, really difficult to feel satisfied,
right.
both physically and emotionally,
Yeah.
if we're not focusing on how the food tastes. We never quite hit that spot if we're distracted and we kind of miss our mark, and then we're able to eat a lot of it without even kind of hitting the spot.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think just a little bit of focus. And I guess one kind of very pearl of wisdom, I suppose, to end with is that the first four mouthfuls always taste the best. So if
Oh,
you can focus on really enjoying at least those first four mouthfuls,
mhm.
that's really going to set you up to enjoy your food a little bit more.
Yeah. And there's mood right there. First form,
That's
just,
right.
and this is life. I mean, who doesn't not everyone loves to eat, but most of us do. So enjoy the food that you have, that you've made, that you've prepared. I just
Mm,
want to answer the last question from Claire. She
yeah.
wants to know on flaxseed, would the preparation matter? For example, would it be better to take a cold milled flaxseed?
It's a very good question. I suppose flaxseed can go rancid quite quickly.
Right.
So the main thing I would probably say, whether it's cold milled or what, I actually don't know the answer to the question specifically. But I guess trying to go for fresh, where you can. So doing things like keeping it in the fridge, is good. It could be whole flax seeds or it could be ground flax seeds. Um, and I think ground flax seeds are very easy to add to whatever. If you're having a cereal, just add a spoon of ground flaxseed, or we make sourdough at home and I add a whole heap of flaxseed, ground flaxseed to my sourdough mix. It could be just adding it to some yogurt, with some fruit
Yeah.
as a snack. So again, it probably comes down to what's easiest for you and what means you're more likely to use it. But keeping it fresh is probably the main one. Sorry, haven't really answered that one so well.
No, it was no, I think you did. I think you did great. This has been really wonderful. I'm really loving seeing how those diets affect us and how important it is to get those things and how much easier it is than I think we think it has to be. And it's less
Mhm.
complicated. So we're definitely going to share your information and where they can find you and if there's any other questions or concerns that you have. This has been great, Vanessa. Thank you. I'm sorry that I wasn't as prepared to take it on today and have as many questions as I would have liked to have asked, but your presentation was so thorough, and I'm sure there's a lot more that we can talk about later. So everyone in the community who've joined us, Sunita said wonderful, and she loved it as well. And Karine, hello, beautiful mama, I know you. Thanks for being here today. We really appreciate your support, and we're thrilled to have had you. So we'll definitely keep in touch, and also let us know what events that you're preparing if there's anything outside of the Bumpwise community, so we can send people your way.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. And thanks for your lovely comments.
My
Yeah, I
pleasure.
hope it just means that there's lots of happy eating going on out there. So thanks for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for joining us. And everyone has said a lovely thank you. Take a note of that before you go, Vanessa, so that you can, everyone's very happy. Okay,
Very
enjoy your
kind.
lunch today, everyone. I hope it's balanced.
Have a great lunch and mindful.
That's right. Off your phones. No phones at the table. That's my teenager.
All
Okay.
right. Thanks, everyone. See you
Thanks,
soon.
everyone.
Bye.